Good evening, everyone. Hopefully, you're having a wonderful day so far. I got a good one for you today. So, if you haven't heard yet or been living under a rock, the postal workers from Canada Post have been on strike for a couple of days now, and it might put Jagmeet Singh in a little bit of hot water. Jagmeet Singh before during the rail strike, he said that he'd give it to Justin Trudeau if he claimed the back to work order. He did, and Jagmeet Singh did nothing. So, wonder what he's going to do this time. But don't let me tell you. We got some videos of Jagmeet saying this himself. So, if you like this video, please like and subscribe. And with no further ado, let's get into it.
What we said at the very beginning when we forced the Liberals to move forward on things like dental care, when I forced Justin Trudeau to move forward on pharmacare, we said if you ever think that you could bring in back to work legislation and call it a confidence vote, we will vote against that every single time. We made it very clear. So they know we will not support any interference, not just back to work legislation, but any interference. If it comes to Parliament, we will be voting against it. We should always negotiate. Particularly the message it sends is that it rewards bad behavior. It rewards an employer if they lock out their workers, if they mistreat their workers, they don't have proper safety, and they say, you know what, we know, anyways, we'll get the outcome we want because the government will just do it back to work or force arbitration. That's why we have to make a clear line in the sand. Never. We should always negotiate fairly, put pressure on getting a fairly negotiated solution, but never force the workers back. That undermines not just these workers, but in any future conflict, it'll send a message that employers can just disrespect their workers. That's wrong.
So that was during the CN rail strike, and guess what? Yeah, the Liberals made a back to work order and sent all the CN rail workers back to work, and not a word out of Jagmeet Singh's mouth. And even if he did not say that he would do a vote of no confidence in the next confidence vote. What they did say is they were going to bring up the topic of abortion, which is kind of a waste because 80% of Canadians in some form of another are pro-abortion. So I got some other videos depicting the union's view on the postal strike and the government's view on the postal strike. Here we got the labor minister and his take on the postal strike, and this is from CBC News. Let's get into it.
Says the federal government says the only path right now to resolution is through negotiations. Stephen McKinnon is the Minister of Labor, and he joins me now. Minister, welcome back to the show.
Good evening, David.
So you've had mediators at the table with Canada Post and its union trying to get a deal. It didn't work. There's a full-blown strike now. So what can the federal government do?
Well, it hasn't worked yet. Of course, mediators will continue to try and assist these parties in bridging what I do have to characterize as significant differences. There are a number of issues that remain to be negotiated that the parties will have to bridge in what is in some cases a significant gulf. But we, of course, are sparing no effort with respect to the resources of the Labor Department and the Labor Program in trying to facilitate a collective agreement.
You've used binding arbitration or used the Industrial Relations Board to use.
So yeah, these talks have been going on for about a year. And to be particularly honest, if it's been going on a year and you haven't been getting anywhere, then it's probably not going to happen all of a sudden. There's probably going to be a point in time where, you're just going to come to an impasse, and I don't know what would happen.
To lead to binding arbitration for rail lockouts and port lockouts. At what point do you consider doing a similar measure for what's happening with the mail service?
Well, I would never rule out any tool that the Canada Labour Code offers the Labour Minister, but what I will say is that for now and for the foreseeable future, We believe that this dispute belongs at the bargaining table with the services of some of the best mediators in the world assisting them. It's not a secret, David, that Canada Post is, in terms of its business model and the business environment it exists in, has undergone, a number of transformations. So we have to ensure an environment where, within that, the aspirations of the union and the workers are met, but also the business objectives of the corporation. That's the essence of any collective bargaining, and it's a challenging environment, but it's one that we remain persuaded needs to be settled at the table.
Yeah, look, they're pretty far away apart on wages and issues around pensions and scheduling, but you said for the foreseeable future. How long do you let this go on for? Because there are small businesses that rely on this for their operations. You're getting up to the holiday season where Christmas gifts are going to be flying back and forth across the country, and a disruption like this is quite significant. So what does for the foreseeable future mean?
Yeah, and you, as the government, you can't just give that vague answer to people who pretty much need to use your service, because remember, there's only one postal service here in Canada. Well, really, there's only one main postal service, and one postal service that the government uses is the Canada Post. And a lot of businesses, if this goes on too long, they can't get any letters or any payments from people, and so they can't pay their guys. For instance, if you own, say, a construction business and you do work for, let's say, contractors all over your province, right? And how it's usually done is nothing's really e-transferred. No payments really e-transferred. I've always seen it done through check, and most of the time the check is mailed to you, because you're not going to drive an hour and a half to a job site to get a check and then drive an hour and a half back home, right? That's not how it's done. Now that the Canada Post is on strike, who knows when that business owner is going to get his check. And then he won't be able to pay his guys who do the work, and he won't be able to pay his bills. And so businesses will struggle and either have to go into debt, or, depending on what happens, might even go under. But we also have to look at the other side. I will wait until the other video where it shows the union's version.
Well, I don't want to speculate. Of course, we evaluate this regularly, even minute by minute. And we'll always bring, as we have in other disputes, the perspective and the context in which these negotiations are occurring. So, of course, we will be listening to retailers, small businesses, of course, the employees of Canada Post and their families. We'll be listening to all of those people as we continue through this very difficult negotiation. That's my job as the Minister of Labour, is to bring the aspirations, the hopes, and the context in which this is going on.
See, I love how they have the red fist that's going up, because you know where that came from? That came from the Bolshevik Revolution, so that's actually the communist fist. It's sort of bad to be walking around with that red fist pointing up, as when you're picketing for your union. I'm just saying, it's not the best symbol to be patrolling out there.
To the negotiating table and cajole, prod, and assist parties in making a deal.
But, you know, Minister, in 2018, when Canada Post was on strike, your government legislated them back to work. And the argument then was that the shopping demands of Black Friday and the Christmas holidays necessitated it. We're a week away from Black Friday. So it is, and I know Parliament is in this stalled state because of the filibuster happening over the privilege motion. But I mean, Black Friday is a week away. So are the circumstances any different in 2024 than they were in 2018? Isn't that still the pressure point that you need to consider?
Well, what I would say is that we'll continue to assess that on a daily basis. And obviously, I'm aware that any disruption in the activities of Canada Post is going to have an impact on our economy, on Canadian families. We're obviously listening closely to that and very sensitive to that. But these are significant negotiations that come at a critical time for the workers and for the corporation. And these are differences that need to be worked out at the negotiating table. So once again, David, if either of those parties are listening, what I'm saying is do the work, knuckle down, and achieve a good agreement that assures the future viability of Canada Post, the services it provides to Canadians, but also gives a fair deal with a safe workplace to the people who work there.
You move very quickly.
And if you hadn't really picked that up, first off, I want to say what the minister here is saying is extremely similar to what he said during the CN rail strike. Like, almost word for word. And they did back to work legislation for that. Now, the other thing on the other side is when the question was asked, he asked, what's the difference between the strike of 2018 to the strike of 2024? So I'm wondering if they're renegotiating a 6-year contract and not a 4-year contract, because that will be incredibly interesting. Because we got to remember, during 2018, they couldn't have anticipated the sheer amount of inflation and the craziness that came during 2020, 2021, and 2022. So they might have, and I have to do some research on this and post it on a different video, they might have only had 2% increase in pay every year, or match something close to inflation. So we'd have to see how much of a raise they got each year, because I believe I'd have to see, but inflation probably went up at least, sorry, I'm just doing the math, like 20% since then. If inflation went that crazy, this is the government's fault. This is the government's own making of how bad these negotiations are, because of the money printing and the sheer amount of inflation they brought. So they brought this on Canadians. But, of course, what they'll say is, oh, it's not our fault, it's the postal workers, or it's the company that owns the post office, right? But anyways, let's not go on too much of a rant. I got another video where I believe it's CTV News interviewed the union negotiator. And let's get at it.
Let's hear from the other side now. Jim Gallant is a negotiator with the Canadian Union of Postal Workers. Thanks so much for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us back.
I'm going to start with the same question I asked Mr. Hamilton. In your opinion, how far apart are the two sides?
Very far apart at this point.
What is the main sticking point then? Why so far apart?
Canada Post has an idea that they're going to part-time the workforce at Canada Post. They use the word gigify to say that they weren't doing it, but they've asked for about 30% of the workforce that exists now to turn into part-time people. That would be scheduled for about 4 hours a day and would be required to work up to 30 hours a week. So you're scheduled for 4 hours and forced to work 6 if there's work there, or maybe even 8 hours. I'm not sure how people can take care of their children or their loved ones or plan their second job because they don't have enough hours.
So not, as Mr. Hamilton
Yeah, unless they get paid a lot more for less hours of work. And what it sounds like is gigifying it. All of a sudden, these postal workers will be turned into Uber drivers, or I don't really know how Amazon drivers, if they're kind of part of the gig economy or not. But to be completely honest, with Canada Post as big as it is, even though it is losing money, they shouldn't be gigifying their jobs. That's just not the way to do it, especially if our government's subsidizing them.
Hamilton was saying so that they can have those flexible hours to work the weekend and possibly other jobs.
They want flexible workers all week long, all week and all weekend.
I want to ask you about the decision to have a nationwide full strike. Why not a rotating strike? When you consider the state of the business of Canada Post and the difficulty that this might incur not only on the brand, but really the business as a whole, are you not worried that it will continue to damage the business that your workers depend on for people to use?
No, we're not going to apologize for taking people out on a picket line. It's a right in Canada, and that was the decision on. We were so far apart. What's a rotating strike going to do for us? We needed to show that there was a problem, and the minister has now appointed another mediator, and Mr. Hamilton said that they didn't want mediation. On the opposite, the union does. We want the government. We want those mediators. They're really skilled. The ones that have been there so far. Another one's coming, and we want to make sure that all of those things are overturned to make sure that we can come to a deal.
I can understand the.
Unfortunately, by not doing a rotating strike, all you're going to bring is animosity towards Canada Post because it's going to destroy small businesses. I hate to equate this to the trucker convoy, but remember during the trucker convoy when all those horns were blaring for all ends of the day and night, it ticked the people of Ottawa, especially people who live downtown, off, and it turned them all against the truckers, or many of them. And this is what the Postal Service is going to be doing for them. They're going to, at best, hinder a lot of these small businesses, and they're going to hurt their bottom lines. And the businesses aren't going to blame the government. The businesses are going to blame the Postal Service. So you're just going to get more and more animosity towards the Postal Service. So I don't understand why the post office just, or Canada Post just doesn't do like 1 week on, 1 week off, half the week on the picket lines, half the week not. So at least we could get stuff done, albeit slower. So it's a nuisance, but it's not really impeding business, if that makes sense.
The urgency that a strike sends to all sides and really gets the attention of the country. However, according to the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, 79% of small businesses rely on Canada Post. Your members are essentially affecting those people. What do you say to those business owners who are sitting there and saying, why did you have to do a full nationwide strike instead of a rotating strike? Because it is affecting their bottom line right now.
I tell every one of them that we want to be at work. And they should be calling Canada Post, asking why Canada Post is trying to part-time all those jobs, and they already have they're somewhere around between the rural and the urban units. There's somewhere around 10,500 temporary workers now, and so they have 10,500, and they want more part-time. So there's only 55,000 in the bargaining units. So you do the math. It's not a lot of full-time work.
Some Canadians, though, and I know you were asked this question earlier this week when Bashi was sitting.
Though I kind of get why they want to part-time it, because they're trying to save money. With part-time gig workers, you can do the same thing that Uber Eats does, where you can reduce the amount of benefits that you give these people. I know they have a union, so it might be a little bit different for the Canada Post. The owners might have a little bit legitimate cause if they're able to bring everybody on as part-time to lower the health benefits, lower other stuff because there's less hours, right? So I do get that from the union's point of view.
Here with you, some Canadians will look at your demands and say that is something that everybody wish they could get, but really unrealistic in this type of economy when you consider that it's upwards of a 23% wage increase and even more of those sick days. I think it's 10 additional sick days to the 7 that you already have. Why are those demands, you think, demands that your workers deserve and that you think that Canada Post can't afford?
I'd tell Canadians first, join a union. And the second thing is the 10 days, Mr. Hamilton talked about those 10 days. Those 10 days are under the Canada Labour Code. We already have 7 days in our collective agreement that are for personal days, so you can use them for a lot of different things. They're personal days. It could be a family illness or whatever. But the government and the minister commented earlier, they put in these 10 personal days, or 10 medical days under the code, and there are also 3 personal days under the code. And Canada Post doesn't want any of that in the collective agreement. They won't put what's in the Canada Labour Code into the collective agreement. And we had more to start with, and that's why we need it can't be status quo with the Canada Labour Code. That's not, you don't join a union to have status quo.
Can this be solved without government?
You tell workers who work for a private business, just create a union or join a union, and then you'll get what we're getting. That's your. Anyways, let's keep going.
Intervention.
I believe so, but the government has every opportunity to intervene with Canada Post. That's the one thing I guess in the ports. That's the one thing I guess in the ports they might not have had that opportunity. But this is a Crown corporation. They need to tell Canada Post to go in there and give us a reasonable wage, and to stop this part-timing of work. The government should be there trying to give Canadians fair jobs with a fair wage, and every one of us as postal workers are in our small communities and big communities spending our money in Canada, spending time in Canada, and instead this is the way Canada Post is treating us.
Okay. No negotiations will continue through the weekend, if I'm not mistaken?
It's going to be a slow weekend, but we will be at the table with the new conciliator, mediator very soon.
Okay. And I'm sure we will check back in with you over the weekend and possibly on Monday. Jim Gallant, negotiator with the Canadian Union of Post.
Okay, and that's that from the union's point of view. I'm not going to do any more ranting about the postal union. I think we all know my views on unions. I don't like them too much, but let me know what you think about this postal strike down below. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Do you think this should actually be happening? And is it going to hurt businesses? Let me know down below. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe. Other than that, have a great day.